There is an episode of South Park where a child walks into a room full of pharmaceutical executives, says he has questions, and the screen cuts to black before he gets to ask them. No answers, no confrontation, no justice. Just a door, a child, and an industry sitting comfortably on the other side of it. That image was made in 2017. The show had been building toward it since 1998, and almost nobody talks about the fact that it is the same argument made across 27 seasons, disguised inside jokes about Ritalin and coffee and testicles and semen-laced marijuana. South Park has been fighting Big Pharma longer than most people realize, more specifically than most people give it credit for, and in ways that go much deeper than any single episode shows you. Today, we're going through all of it. Every piece, every connection, the full picture. Welcome to East Park. Let us get into it. The Ritalin Epidemic. Timmy 2000, Season 4, Episode 3, aired April 19th, 2000. There is a moment in Timmy 2000 where a school doctor diagnoses an entire classroom of children with a medical condition, one after another in about 30 seconds. No tests, no history, no real examination of any kind. He just looks at each kid, nods, and writes a prescription. The speed of it is the joke, but underneath the joke is something Parker and Stone were genuinely angry about, and the anger is specific enough that it still lands 25 years later. The episode begins with Timmy joining Mr. Garrison's 4th grade class at South Park Elementary. Timmy is physically disabled, uses a motorized wheelchair, and can communicate almost nothing beyond his own name. His disability is obvious to anyone paying attention. Mr. Garrison and Principal Victoria are not paying attention. What they are paying attention to is the fact that Timmy cannot answer questions in class, cannot complete assignments, and cannot demonstrate any of the things a standard school day asks children to demonstrate. This is a problem for the school, not because the school cares about Timmy, but because a student who cannot perform creates paperwork and disruption. Mr. Mackey, the school counselor, suggests that Timmy might have ADD, which stands for Attention Deficit Disorder. This is the condition used to explain why children have trouble focusing, or sitting still, or following instructions. They send Timmy to a doctor to be evaluated. The evaluation consists of the doctor reading the entire novel The Great Gatsby out loud, from beginning to end, to Timmy and 2 school officials who fall asleep during the reading. When he finishes, the doctor asks one question about a minor detail from Chapter 7. Timmy cannot answer it. The doctor concludes that Timmy has ADD and prescribes Ritalin immediately. This is the diagnostic process South Park is skewering, and it is not made up. The episode aired in the year 2000, right in the middle of a national conversation in the United States about exactly this problem. During the 1990s, the number of Ritalin prescriptions written in America increased by roughly 700%. The argument being made by doctors, school administrators, and parents at the time was that ADD had simply been underdiagnosed before. The argument being made by critics, including Parker and Stone in this episode, was that something else was going on entirely. Once Timmy has his diagnosis, he is excused from all homework and all schoolwork. He no longer has to answer questions. He no longer has to perform. This is the moment the other kids in the class notice, and their response is immediate. Every single one of them raises their hand and says they have ADD too. Stan claims he has it, Kyle claims he has it, Cartman claims he has it, Kenny claims he has it. Every kid in the class makes the same claim for the same reason, which is that Timmy is now free from the burden that everyone else is stuck with. Here is the part that makes the episode work as actual social criticism rather than just a cartoon complaining about school. The doctor diagnoses all of them. Every child who claims to have ADD gets a prescription. The same doctor, the same method, the same speed. There is no real evaluation happening at any point. The prescription is not a response to a genuine medical need. The prescription is a response to a claim. The system being shown here is one that cannot tell the difference between a child who genuinely struggles with attention and a child who simply does not want to do homework, because the diagnostic process is not designed to tell the difference. It is designed to produce prescriptions. The kids start taking their Ritalin. The show depicts what happens to them in a way that is both funny and genuinely unsettling. They become calm. Very calm, unnaturally calm. They stop reacting to things that would normally set them off. They speak in flat, slow voices. They sit still without complaint. The adults in South Park are initially uncomfortable with this because the kids are so quiet and still that something feels wrong. But the adults get over their discomfort very quickly because the alternative to medicated children is unmedicated children, and unmedicated children are harder to manage. So the adults accept the trade. Then the adults start taking the Ritalin themselves. This is where the episode makes its most pointed observation. The parents of South Park, seeing how calm and manageable their children have become, start dipping into the prescription bottles. By the middle of the episode, most of the adults in town are also on Ritalin. Chef, the school chef, and the only character in this episode who is treated as morally correct, tries to tell the parents that this is wrong. He tries to convince them that there are other ways to address whatever real attention issues any of the kids might have. He suggests actual engagement with their children as a starting point. Nobody listens to him because everybody is on Ritalin. Cartman develops a specific side effect from taking a higher dose than prescribed. He begins seeing hallucinations of a creature he describes as a pink monster with Christina Aguilera's face. These hallucinations are genuinely frightening to him in the moment, and one of them leads directly to Kenny's death in this episode, when Cartman swings a frying pan at the hallucination and hits Kenny instead. This is South Park using one of its regular jokes, Kenny dying, to make a point about prescription drug side effects. The death is a direct result of a child taking medication he was never supposed to need, at doses that produce hallucinations. And the show does not treat it as something to feel good about. The pharmacist and the doctor who wrote all the prescriptions have a shared financial reason to keep this going. The episode reveals that both of them bought stock in Ritalin before the wave of prescriptions began. Their moment of guilt, described earlier as the show's clearest satirical move, only arrives when Chef tells them that the Ritalin has made the children so dull and flat that they are now enjoying Phil Collins concerts. The pharmacist says out loud that he has an antidote called Ritalout and that he has been keeping it in stock. He has an antidote. He has had it all along. He just had no financial reason to use it. Phil Collins is in this episode for a reason that is personal to Parker and Stone. At the 1999 Academy Awards, Phil Collins won the award for Best Original Song for a song from the Disney movie Tarzan. The song that lost to it was Blame Canada, which Parker and Stone had written for the South Park movie. Collins is depicted in the episode as a pompous, self-important man who carries his Oscar everywhere he goes and uses it to demand special treatment. The show makes him the measuring stick for how bad things have gotten. When the pharmacist realizes the Ritalin has made children willing to attend a Phil Collins concert, that is the line. That is the moment the medical community decides it has gone too far. The joke is specific and petty in the best way, but it does not undercut the episode's actual argument. The argument is that the Ritalin boom of the 1990s was not a medical discovery. It was a commercial opportunity dressed up in the language of care. Chef, after convincing the pharmacist and doctor to use the Ritalout, goes to the Phil Collins concert where the medicated children are sitting in the audience looking half dead. He and the pharmacist move through the crowd administering the antidote. The children wake up. They come back to themselves. They start reacting to things again. And their first reaction, upon having their brains restored to normal function, is to boo Phil Collins off the stage. Timmy is not on Ritalin during any of this, by the way. Timmy, the character whose misdiagnosis started the entire chain of events, has spent the episode becoming the lead singer of a band called Timmy and the Lords of the Underworld, performing at festivals and having what appears to be the time of his life. The band is successful specifically because Timmy is in it. His way of performing, which consists almost entirely of shouting his own name with tremendous energy, is electric in a way that polished conventional performances are not. He does not need the diagnosis. He does not need the medication. He needed someone to put him in a room with people who were paying attention to what he was actually capable of, rather than what he was failing to do in a standard classroom format. The episode ends with the children, back to their regular selves, chanting for Timmy while Phil Collins is carried out of the venue. The pharmacist stands somewhere in the crowd, holding the remainder of his Ritalout. The medical system that created the problem has now administered the fix, and nothing about the system has actually changed. The same doctor is still there, the same pharmacy is still there, the same diagnostic process is still available. The episode does not end with reform. It ends with a good concert and a returned sense of normalcy and the clear implication that nothing is stopping this from happening again. Isaac Hayes, who voiced Chef on South Park and was a Scientologist, was deeply enthusiastic about this episode when it was made. Scientology as a belief system has strong objections to the way psychiatry uses medication, and the episode aligned with those objections closely enough that Hayes saw it as a genuine piece of cultural criticism rather than just another South Park bit. He was right that the criticism was genuine, even if the episode dressed it in Phil Collins jokes and Christina Aguilera hallucinations. What Parker and Stone were doing in this episode in the year 2000 was mapping a system. The map shows a school that wants compliance, a medical profession that provides a diagnosis, a pharmaceutical industry that sells the solution, and a set of adults who accept all of it because managed children are easier to live with than engaged ones. Chef stands outside the map trying to point at what is wrong with it. Nobody listens to Chef. In South Park, nobody ever listens to Chef, and he is almost always right. The Ritalin episode is where South Park first planted its flag on this specific piece of ground. But Timmy 2000 is only dealing with one end of the problem: children being over-medicated for the convenience of institutions around them. What the show would return to again and again across the next 2 decades is the adult end of the same problem: how adults convince themselves they are sick in ways that require pharmaceutical solutions, how the medical industry meets that need, and how an entire character, a man named Randy Marsh, would become the show's most extended and darkest study of what happens when someone genuinely cannot tell the difference between a problem they have and a problem that is being sold to them. That starts much earlier than most people realize, and it starts with a coffee shop and a child who cannot stop shaking. Section 2, The Tweak Origin. Gnomes, Season 2, Episode 17, aired December 16th, 1998. Before South Park ever made an episode specifically about Ritalin, before the pharmacist and the doctor bought their stock, before an entire classroom got medicated into attending a Phil Collins concert, there was a boy named Tweak. He showed up 2 years earlier in Season 2 in an episode about underpants stealing gnomes and a corporate coffee chain trying to take over a small town. He was not the main story. He was not even close to the main story. But what Parker and Stone built into the background of his introduction was something they would pull on for the next 25 years. And it is one of the most quietly disturbing running jokes the show has ever produced. Tweak is a 4th grade student. He is blonde, slightly small, and dressed in a shirt that is never buttoned correctly. He shakes. Not occasionally, not when he is scared or surprised, but constantly, all the time, as a baseline state of being. His eyes are wide, his hands tremble. He speaks in short bursts, interrupted by sounds of distress. He describes even ordinary tasks as being too much pressure. When the boys are assigned to work with him on a school report, the first thing they notice is that something is clearly wrong with this kid in a way that nobody around him seems to be treating as urgent. Tweak's parents own Tweak Bros Coffee House, a small local coffee shop in South Park. The shop has been in business for 30 years. The commercial they run describes their product as something like a hug from a family member or rain on a warm afternoon, the kind of cozy, wholesome language small businesses use to separate themselves from corporate chains. The Tweaks are presented initially as sympathetic figures, a family trying to keep something real alive against the pressure of a massive corporation moving in on their territory. The corporation is Starbucks, a clear reference to Starbucks, which had been rapidly expanding across America throughout the 1990s. A representative from Starbucks offers Mr. Tweak a briefcase and a buyout. Mr. Tweak refuses. He decides to fight back. His method of fighting back is to write a school report for the boys that argues against corporate coffee chains and then have them deliver it to the South Park Town Committee, pretending it is their own work. The report works. The town rallies against Starbucks. The episode builds toward a vote on whether Starbucks should be allowed to operate in South Park. This is the main plot. This is what most people remember about gnomes. The underpants gnomes and their 3-phase business plan. Phase 1 being collecting underpants, phase 2 being blank, and phase 3 being profit is the episode's most famous bit. A joke about businesses that have no idea how they actually intend to make money beyond a vague gesture toward a future step they have not figured out yet. What the episode is doing with Tweak is something else entirely. The boys go to Tweak's house to work on the report. Mr. Tweak gives them coffee to to help them stay awake through the night. He gives them a lot of coffee. The boys, who do not regularly drink coffee, immediately go haywire. They bounce off the walls. They cannot hold a thought. They are wired in a way that is chaotic and funny to watch, but would be alarming in a real child. Then, hours later, they crash completely. They are useless. Cartman is shown throwing up from the caffeine overdose. Tweek watches all of this happen with the mild recognition of someone who has seen it before, because he has. He has been drinking this coffee his entire life. He lives in the same state the boys briefly enter and then come crashing out of. Except for Tweek, there is no crash, because the supply never stops. His parents are always ready with another cup. When he seems to need to calm down, they give him more coffee. This is stated plainly in the episode. Tweek's mother defends giving her son enormous amounts of coffee by explaining that he has ADD. His attention deficit disorder, she says, is the reason he shakes and panics and cannot function normally. The coffee is not making it worse. The coffee is, according to her, actually helping. This is the layer that makes Tweek's introduction so specifically disturbing once you understand what the show has built into it. His parents are not presented in this episode as villains. They are presented as small business owners under pressure, as parents who love their child and want the best for him, as people fighting the good fight against corporate encroachment. And they are also, without any awareness of what they are doing, poisoning their son and then using a medical diagnosis to explain away the symptoms of the poisoning. The ADD diagnosis does something very useful for the Tweeks. It explains Tweek. It gives his condition a name that is separate from anything they are responsible for. If Tweek shakes because he has ADD, then the coffee is not the problem. The coffee is, if anything, a stimulant that a child with ADD might find focusing. There is an inverted logic to it that the show never spells out, but that sits inside every scene Tweek is in. His parents have found a diagnosis that makes their behavior not just acceptable, but caring. In the South Park video game The Stick of Truth, released in 2014, this backstory is confirmed and extended. Tweek Bro's Coffeehouse coffee is revealed to be secretly laced with methamphetamine. The game has Tweek send the player to the McCormick meth lab to retrieve a package and has it delivered to Tweek Bros for mixing into the coffee supply. Richard Tweek, Tweek's father, taste tests the delivered product and says it is good. This is not presented as a reveal in the original Gnomes episode, but the groundwork is there. The coffee is too powerful to just be coffee. The effects it has on the boys in a single night are more extreme than caffeine alone would produce. The show was not confirming it explicitly in 1998, but it was building something that could be confirmed later. What this means for Tweek as a character is that his anxiety, his shaking, his constant state of barely held together panic is not a medical condition he was born with. It is a condition that has been chemically induced by the people responsible for his care, and then medically labeled by those same people to remove their own responsibility from the picture. He drinks the thing that makes him sick. He is told he is sick for a different reason. He is given more of the thing that makes him sick as a response to the sickness. And at no point in the episode, or in any episode after it, do his parents face any consequences for this. The ADD diagnosis is doing a specific kind of work here that connects directly to what Timmy 2000 would dramatize 2 seasons later. In Timmy 2000, the diagnosis is used by a school to manage a student it does not want to deal with, and by a pharmaceutical industry to sell a product. In Gnomes, the diagnosis is used by parents to explain away something they are actively causing. The end result looks the same from the outside. A child with a label, a child on substances, a child whose actual situation is being addressed by nobody. The mechanism is different. The outcome for the child is identical. Tweek cannot stop shaking. The show never lets him stop. Even in his most relaxed moments, there is a tremor. Even when he is with people he trusts, even when nothing is immediately threatening him, the baseline vibration is always there. He has been this way since before the audience meets him, and the episode makes clear he will be this way as long as the coffee keeps coming. Since his parents own the coffee shop, the coffee will always keep coming. The episode resolves its main plot in a way that is genuinely surprising for a show that usually lets the establishment win. The boys, at the actual town vote, abandon the report Tweek's dad wrote for them and tell the truth. They did not write it. They did not know enough about corporations to have written it, and they learned from talking to the Underpants Gnomes that corporations become big not because they are evil, but because their products are good. They suggest the town just try Harbucks before voting to ban it. Mrs. Tweek, Tweek's mother, immediately agrees and encourages encourages the crowd to taste the coffee before deciding. The crowd tries it. Everyone agrees it is better than Tweek Bros coffee. Harbucks wins. Mr. Tweek accepts a job running the new Harbucks location. The episode's point about small business versus corporations lands in a complicated place, which is intentional. Mr. Tweek was not actually fighting for values. He was fighting for his market share. The moment his wife decides to be honest, the moral argument he had been making collapses, because the moral argument was never separate from the business argument. Parker and Stone are doing something here that they do throughout South Park. They are refusing to let the sympathetic-looking underdog be automatically correct just because the big corporation looks bad. The gnomes, it turns out, know more about how business actually works than Mr. Tweek does, even if their specific plan is also nonsensical. But none of this changes what is happening to Tweek. The business plot resolves. The Tweek family situation does not. His father gets a job at Harbucks. His mother continues to explain his condition as ADD. The coffee continues. The shaking continues. And the show simply moves on. Because that is also part of the point. The systems that are harming Tweek are not dramatic enough to be noticed by anyone around him. They are normal, they are daily, they are built into the routine of a family business and a medical label that nobody is going to look behind. Kyle is the only character in the episode who notices something is wrong with how Tweek is being treated. He calls out both the gnomes and the Tweeks for what they are doing to Tweek's well-being. His concern is acknowledged and then ignored, because Kyle being the moral voice of a room and being ignored is one of the most consistent things South Park does. Kyle is right. Nobody cares. Tweek keeps shaking. The character would return in season 3 for his own episode, where his father's communication style, all long stories that never go anywhere and folksy comparisons that explain nothing, is presented as one of the practical reasons Tweek cannot get actual help. The people responsible for explaining things to him are not equipped to explain anything. The people responsible for medicating him are medicating him with the wrong substance and calling it care. And the diagnosis sitting over all of it, the ADD label his mother offers every time someone asks why this child cannot function, is the thing that closes off any further investigation before it begins. This is what South Park planted in 1998, before the Rolin conversation had fully exploded nationally, before the show would return to it directly in season 4. Tweek is the earlier, quieter, more personal version of the same argument. Timmy 2000 shows the industrial system. Gnomes shows what that system looks like inside a single family, both of them in the same way. The child is still suffering, the adults around the child have reached a comfortable explanation that requires nothing more of them, and life continues. What makes Tweek worth understanding before you go any further into South Park's history with pharmaceutical criticism is that he never gets fixed. The show runs for over 25 years after his introduction. Tweek becomes part of the permanent cast. He gets a relationship. He gets more screen time. He grows up alongside the other characters. And through all of it, the shaking is still there. The coffee is still there. The parents are still there, still offering more coffee whenever things get bad, still calling it a nervous condition, still doing exactly what they were doing in 1998. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Parker and Stone were not done with the idea of parents using medical labels to avoid looking at what they are actually doing to their children. But the next time they returned to that territory, they would not focus on one child in one family. They would focus on an entire school, an entire town, and a doctor who had bought pharmaceutical stock before writing a single prescription. And before that, they built a third version of this argument, one that does not involve children at all, and involves a substance that is not a prescription drug, and a man who cannot tell the difference between a real problem and one he has been convinced to have. Section 3. The Diagnosis as Currency System. Tweek vs. Craig. Season 3, Episode 4. Aired June 23, 1999. 6 months after Gnomes introduced Tweek to the world, South Park brought him back for his own episode. And where Gnomes used Tweek as a background detail in a story that was mostly about coffee shops and underpants gnomes, Tweek vs. Craig puts him front and center in a way that makes the ADD label impossible to ignore. Because in this episode, the diagnosis is not just sitting there quietly in the background doing its work. It is actively being used in real time by real adults to avoid doing something they do not want to do. The setup is simple. simple. The boys are bored. Cartman decides the most entertaining thing available to them is a fight between two kids who have no actual reason to fight each other. He picks Tweek and Craig Tucker, a quiet, bored, permanently unimpressed kid who spends most of his time flipping people off. Neither Tweek nor Craig has a problem with the other. They barely interact. There is no conflict between them that needs resolving. The boys manufacture one entirely from scratch by going to each of them separately and lying about what the other one said. Cartman tells Craig that Tweek has been talking badly about his guinea pig. This works because Craig actually cares about his guinea pig, which is one of the few things Craig has ever been shown to care about. Cartman tells Tweek that Craig wants to fight him. This works because Tweek is anxious enough about everything that the idea of someone wanting to fight him is immediately overwhelming, regardless of whether it is true. The fight gets arranged. Both kids show up, and then almost nothing happens. Neither Tweek nor Craig knows how to fight. They are 9 years old. They half-heartedly swing at each other in a way that satisfies nobody watching. The crowd is annoyed. The boys reschedule the fight and decide to actually teach them how to fight first. Cartman teaches Craig some moves. The other boys teach Tweek. The second fight is a real fight. Both of them end up in the hospital. This is where the episode does its specific work. Tweek is in a hospital bed. His parents show up. And the response from Richard Tweek, Tweek's father, to the situation of his son being injured in a fight he was manipulated into by other children is to sit down and begin telling a long, winding story that does not connect to anything happening in the room. His communication style, which the show had set up in Gnomes and is paying off here, is all metaphor and no substance. He talks around the situation. He uses comparisons that do not apply. He offers words that sound like comfort but deliver nothing. Tweek, who is sitting there in a hospital bed, listens to his father talk and gets nothing useful from any of it. Mrs. Tweek is not better. She defaults immediately to the explanation she always defaults to. Tweek's behavior, his anxiety, his inability to handle pressure, his constant state of barely functioning distress is the ADD. It is always the ADD. Whatever is happening to Tweek at any given moment, the diagnosis is available as a complete explanation that requires no further examination. He shakes because he has ADD. He panics because he has ADD. He ended up in a hospital bed because, presumably, the ADD made him unable to walk away from a situation that was bad for him. The episode confirms something that Gnomes had only implied, which is that Tweek's parents have no real awareness of their son as an individual beyond what the label tells them. Richard does not know how to talk to Tweek in a way that helps. Helen does not look at what is causing the problems. The diagnosis is not a tool they are using to get Tweek help. It is a tool they are using to explain why no further help is needed. The label closes the door rather than opening one. This is the diagnosis as currency system the section title is pointing at. A diagnosis has value in this context not because it leads to treatment that works, but because it can be spent in place of attention. Every time someone might look more closely at Tweek and ask what is actually going on with this child, the ADD can be produced, and the question stops there. It costs nothing to produce, it explains everything, it requires nothing more from the people holding it. Richard Tweek's communication failure is not accidental background detail. It is the show drawing a direct line between how this family talks and why Tweek is the way he is. A parent who cannot speak plainly to a child cannot help that child understand or manage what is happening to him. A parent who reaches for a diagnosis whenever the child is distressed does not need to learn to speak plainly because the diagnosis handles the distress on paper without anyone having to actually engage with it. The two failures work together. The communication failure makes honest engagement impossible. The diagnosis makes honest engagement unnecessary. Tweek, for his part, goes through the entire episode in his standard state of barely contained panic. He does not want to fight Craig. He says this repeatedly. He does not see a reason to fight Craig. He does not understand what Craig has supposedly done to warrant a fight. He is pushed into it anyway by children who are bored and adults who are not paying enough attention to notice what is being done to their son. His objections are louder than Craig's objections because Tweek's anxiety makes everything louder, but they are treated the same way. Neither kid's unwillingness to fight is respected by anyone around them. Craig is interesting to look at alongside Tweek in this episode because Craig is the opposite case. Where Tweek is visibly, loudly, constantly struggling, Craig is visibly, permanently, completely flat. He does not react to much. He does not get excited. He flips people off with a boredom that suggests he has been doing it so long it no longer even satisfies him. The show never gives Craig a diagnosis. The show never offers a medical explanation for Craig's detachment. He is just like that. Nobody sends Craig to a doctor. Nobody writes Craig a prescription. He gets to be a difficult, unresponsive kid without having his personality labeled and filed. The contrast between how the two characters are treated, one medicated and explained, one simply left alone, is not something the episode points at directly. South Park rarely points at the things it is doing directly, but it is there for anyone watching both of them in the same frame. The diagnosis did not happen to Craig, it happened to Tweek, and the difference between them, in terms of how the adults around them respond, is significant. Tweek gets the label and the coffee and the explanation. Craig gets nothing except a phone call from PC Principal about a fight, which makes his father relieved rather than concerned. There is a detail from Tweek versus Craig that the show confirms later, and that changes the texture of the entire episode in retrospect. Tweek's weight at the time of this episode is listed as 48 pounds. He is 9 years old. 48 pounds is extremely low for a 9-year-old. The show does not call attention to this number in the episode itself. It appears in what is presented as a weigh-in before the fight. But 48 pounds is the weight of a child who is not eating properly, or who is burning through everything he consumes because his body is in a constant state of agitation. A child on meth, even unknowingly, even through coffee, would look exactly like this. Small, underweight, burning energy constantly, unable to regulate. The adults around Tweek see a child with ADD. The show is asking anyone paying attention to see something else. By the end of the episode, the fight has happened, both boys have been hospitalized, the boys who arranged it confessed to the class that they made the whole thing up, and Tweek and Craig scuffle again in the hospital room anyway. Nothing is resolved. The system that produced the situation, bored kids with no supervision and parents who respond to crises with metaphors and diagnoses, is exactly the same at the end of the episode as it was at the beginning. Tweek goes home still shaking. His parents go home still holding the ADD explanation. The coffee shop is still open. The coffee is still being made. The diagnosis is still available for whenever it is needed next. What Tweek versus Craig adds to the picture that Gnome started is a confirmation that the problem is not accidental and not temporary. Gnomes could be read as a single episode that happens to have this dark background detail. Tweek versus Craig is the show returning to that detail deliberately, 6 months later, and making it worse. The parents are shown failing more specifically. The diagnosis is shown being used more clearly as a substitute for engagement. Tweek's physical state is shown as something that has real consequences when the world around him stops accommodating it, which it does whenever other people's entertainment requires him to do something he cannot handle. South Park was building a picture across 3 seasons. A child with a medical label that explains his condition without addressing it. Parents who use that label to avoid the harder work of actually helping him. A substance being given to him daily that is making the condition worse while being described as irrelevant to the condition. And a system of adults around him, doctors, school officials, parents, counselors, who all accept the label and move on. __quote _5 __. The next time South Park went after the pharmaceutical system directly, it would not be through a background character or a running subplot. It would be through Randy Marsh, a man who does not have a child's diagnosis to hide behind, and who will prove, across multiple episodes, that adults can build the same self-deception entirely on their own. And the place it starts is not with a pill or a doctor, it starts with a bottle. Section 4. Bloody Mary and the Disease Medicalization of Behavior. Season 9, Episode 14, aired December 7th, 2005. Randy Marsh gets pulled over for drunk driving in the opening minutes of this episode. He has been drinking. He is clearly drunk. He tries to pee into a beer bottle while driving, gets spotted by the police, and gets arrested. His license is revoked. He is ordered to perform community service and attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for 2 weeks as part of his legal consequences. This is the starting point. A man who drank too much, drove a car while drunk, got caught, and now has to deal with what comes next. What comes next is the part South Park is interested in. The AA meetings Randy is sent to are run by a man named Michael. Michael tells Randy and the other attendees with complete seriousness and total conviction that they have a disease. Not a bad habit, not a choice that got out of hand, not a pattern of behavior they developed over time that they can choose to change. A disease. Something that exists inside them, in their bodies, in their chemistry, that makes them powerless to stop drinking on their own. The 12-step program that Michael introduces builds on this idea. You cannot fix yourself. You need a higher power. You are sick and the sickness controls you. Randy is skeptical at first. Stan, who describes his father as a hypochondriac, watches the whole thing nervously because he knows exactly what is about to happen. A hypochondriac is someone who constantly believes they are sick with things they do not actually have. When you tell a hypochondriac they have a disease, you are not giving them information. You are giving them permission, and Randy takes the permission immediately. Within a very short time, Randy has gone from a man who drinks more than he should to a man who is convinced he has a fatal illness that he cannot control. He starts drinking more. The logic is strange but internally consistent for him. If the disease controls him and not the other way around, then his drinking is not his fault. And since it is not his fault, there is no point in resisting it. He drinks at home, openly, in the middle of the day. He gets a wheelchair from somewhere and starts using it, despite having nothing wrong with his legs, because being sick means being visibly sick. He shaves his head at some point. He is performing the role of a seriously ill person, with the commitment of someone who has genuinely convinced himself that the role is real. Stan watches all of this and says the thing that the episode is actually arguing, that his dad just needs to drink less, that it is that simple, that nobody needed to tell Randy he had a disease for that to be possible. But Stan is a child and Randy is a grown man who has now been medically informed by an authority figure that his behavior is outside his control, and so Stan's straightforward observation gets dismissed completely. Here is the specific thing South Park is targeting in this episode. The idea that behavioral problems, things people do repeatedly and have trouble stopping, should be understood as diseases in the same way that cancer or infections are diseases. This idea became very influential in American medical thinking during the second half of the 20th century. It produced the language of addiction as illness rather than addiction as choice, which on one hand removed a certain amount of shame and moral judgment from people struggling with substances, and on the other hand handed those people a framework in which they were fundamentally powerless and required ongoing professional treatment to manage their condition. South Park is not saying people do not struggle with alcohol. South Park is not saying that stopping drinking is easy or that everyone can just decide to do it one morning and be fine. What it is saying is that the disease model of behavioral problems, the specific framing that tells people they are sick and powerless, can be used by institutions to create dependency on those institutions. If you need a higher power to stop drinking and the institution offering the higher power is AA, then you need AA. If you need ongoing treatment to manage your disease and the treatment is being provided by a medical system that gets paid to provide it, then you need the medical system. The framing produces the need. Randy needs a miracle. This is what he says out loud in his wheelchair, drinking at home while his family watches. He cannot be cured except by something beyond human ability. And then, conveniently, a miracle appears. A statue of the Virgin Mary at a church in a nearby town called Bailey starts bleeding from what a priest describes as her rear end. The news covers it immediately. People start showing up at the church hoping that the bleeding statue can cure their illnesses. The crowd includes people with genuinely serious conditions, things that are actually diseases in the traditional sense, cancer, severe physical disabilities. Randy watches the news report, sees people being cured at the statue, and decides this is exactly what he has been waiting for. His alcoholism is the worst disease anyone in that line is suffering from. He is certain of this, and the statue will fix him. Stan drives his drunk, wheelchair-bound father to Bailey because Randy no longer has a license and is also too drunk to drive. When they get to the church, Randy pushes to the front of the line by arguing that his disease is more severe than everyone else's. An officer lets him through because his brother is also an alcoholic. The statue bleeds on Randy. Randy stands up from his wheelchair, declares himself cured, and does not drink for the next several days. He is fine. He is happy. He is healthy. He attends his AA meetings in a restaurant called Whistlin' Willie's and tells everyone about the miracle. He is fully, genuinely better. And he got better because he believed he got better. The show is pointing at this very directly. Randy's alcoholism responded to the statue not because the statue has any actual power, but because Randy believed it did. did. His belief that he was cured produced the cure, which means the belief was the thing doing the work the entire time, not the statue, and not the disease model, and not the 12-step program, and not the higher power. Then Pope Benedict XVI gets involved. The Pope travels to Bailey to examine the statue personally. After his examination, he makes an announcement. The blood is not coming from the statue's rear end as originally reported. It is coming from the statue's front. Since, as the Pope explains with complete flatness, that is a normal biological function for female anatomy and not a miracle, the statue is not miraculous. It is not a divine sign. There is nothing supernatural happening in Bailey. Randy hears this news at the restaurant with the other recovering alcoholics. The moment they learn the Pope has ruled it not a miracle, every single one of them immediately goes back to drinking. Randy is back at the bar ordering multiple drinks before the news segment is even finished. Because if God did not cure him, then he is still powerless. If the miracle was not a miracle, then the disease is back in charge. The framework he accepted from the AA meetings told him that only a higher power could fix him. So the moment the higher power is taken away, the fix goes with it. Stan follows his father out of the restaurant and makes the argument one more time. If God did not make you stop drinking, Stan says, then you must have stopped by yourself. Which means you can do it. Which means the disease does not control you the way you were told it does. Randy sits with this for a moment. It gets through. He decides he will stop drinking entirely. Stan pushes back on this too. If Randy completely stops drinking, Stan argues, then drinking is still controlling his life, just in a different direction. The goal is not to be ruled by alcohol in either direction, either through constant drinking or through the constant effort of avoiding it. The goal is moderation. The goal is discipline, which the episode spells as discipline throughout because of a running joke about Stan's accent. True control means being able to have a drink sometimes without the drink running your life. Not because a higher power intervened, not because a disease went into hiding, because Randy decided to be in charge of himself. This is the episode's actual argument, and it is not a subtle one. The disease model of behavioral problems, in South Park's view, does not help people take control of their lives. It helps people explain why they cannot. The AA framework is shown creating the very powerlessness it claims to be treating. Randy drinks more, not less, after being told he has an illness he cannot control. He only gets better when someone tells him the truth, that the power was his the whole time, that the miracle he needed was not divine, that what he actually needed was to be told he was capable instead of told he was sick. The episode caused real controversy when it aired. Catholic organizations in several countries objected strongly to how the Virgin Mary statue was depicted. In New Zealand, the episode was pulled from television after complaints were filed with the broadcasting authority there. This happened not because of the AA argument, which is the part of the episode that has aged into something worth thinking about, but because of the specific visual of the statue. The argument about medicalization and powerlessness got much less attention at the time than the religious imagery did. That is a pattern with South Park. The loud, offensive surface absorbs the reaction that might otherwise land on the quieter argument underneath. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Randy Marsh is established in this episode as someone who is genuinely susceptible to being told he is sick. He is a hypochondriac. He will believe a diagnosis if it is delivered with enough authority. He will perform the role of sick person with complete commitment. He will organize his entire life around a medical label if someone official hands it to him. These are the character traits that will become the engine of some of South Park's most sustained pharmaceutical satire over the next 15 years. But before Randy's relationship with the medical system gets fully developed, the show went back to the school setting one more time, to a moment where the question of what counts as medicine and what counts as something else gets drawn in the most ridiculous terms possible, using a doctor's cancer diagnosis, a microwave, and a very large pair of testicles. Section 5, quote, 8, when the system gatekeeps its own products. Season 14, Episode 3, aired March 31st, 2010. The KFC in South Park gets shut down. This is the event that starts the episode, and for Cartman, it registers as a genuine emergency, not an inconvenience, not a disappointment, a crisis. He is dropped off at the restaurant by Randy after a soccer practice he spent entirely faking a stomachache to avoid playing, and the building has been converted into a medical marijuana dispensary. The KFC sign is gone. The familiar building that Cartman has organized a portion of his emotional life around is now selling something he has no interest in and cannot legally purchase. He stands in front of it, and the look on his face is the look of a person whose world has shifted under their feet. The new law that closed every KFC location in Colorado is a law against fast food restaurants operating in low-income areas. The show does not spend much time explaining this law or defending it. It simply exists, it has taken effect, and the consequence is that fried chicken is now gone from South Park and from every other low-income neighborhood in the state. This is the first of the two rules the episode is built around. A substance has been made unavailable through legal regulation, and the regulation has created an immediate and desperate demand in the people who used to have access to it. Randy is standing next to Cartman when the KFC becomes a dispensary, and his reaction is the opposite of Cartman's. Randy is delighted. He wants marijuana. He has wanted marijuana for reasons the episode never fully specifies, but the wanting is immediate and strong. He goes inside to get some. The person behind the counter explains the rules. Marijuana is only available with a medical card, and a medical card is only available with a doctor's referral, and a doctor's referral is only available to people who have a qualifying medical condition. The conditions listed are serious ones: cancer, AIDS, things that cause genuine suffering in the people who have them. Randy is in perfect health. He goes to a doctor hoping there is some angle he has missed, some way a healthy person might qualify. The doctor confirms what the dispensary told him. Randy needs to be sick to get the card. Specifically, he needs to have one of the conditions on the qualifying list. Randy asks about his options, considers what he has heard, and goes home to think. The thinking produces a plan that the episode treats as completely logical within Randy's personal framework, which is that he will give himself cancer. Not because he wants cancer, because cancer is on the list, and the list is the thing standing between him and the marijuana. The logic chain is direct, and Randy follows it without hesitation. He tries tanning himself for extended periods. He smokes. He gets as many x-ray scans as he can talk doctors into giving him. None of it works fast enough. He buys a book about cancer and reads through it looking for methods. He finds a section about testicular cancer, which the book describes as one of the most aggressive types, and notes can be brought on by heavy doses of radiation. Randy looks at this information. He looks at his microwave. He puts his body parts into the microwave. The next morning, he wakes up and his testicles have swollen to an enormous size. Lab tests confirm testicular cancer. The doctor who delivers this news is focused on treatment options and what Randy should do next medically. Randy is focused entirely on getting his referral. He gets it. He goes to the dispensary. He fills the prescription and immediately begins smoking marijuana in public, in front of Officer Barbrady and his brother-in-law Jimbo, in a way that makes clear he has been waiting for this for some time. His testicles continue to grow. They grow to the point where he needs a wheelbarrow to carry them when he walks. He eventually uses them as a hopper ball, bouncing through the streets of South Park on what his body has produced. This is the episode's most famous image, and it is impossible to miss. But the image is doing something beyond just being outrageous. Randy voluntarily gave himself cancer. He did it using a kitchen appliance. He did it because a medical regulation told him that cancer was the price of admission for a substance he wanted. The system required sickness, so he manufactured sickness. The regulation produced the exact behavior it had no intention of producing. This is what South Park is arguing. When institutions control access to a substance through medical gatekeeping, they do not eliminate demand for that substance. They redirect it. They force people who want the substance to find a path through the medical system, and people who want something badly enough will find that path even if the path requires harming themselves to walk it. Randy's self-inflicted cancer is absurd in its specifics. The behavior it is mocking is not absurd at all. It is the predictable result of building a wall between a person and something they want, and then leaving a medical door in the wall that anyone who gets sick enough can walk through. Cartman's story runs parallel to Randy's and makes the same argument from a different angle. After KFC is removed from South Park entirely, Cartman finds out through a network of kids and teenagers that a boy named Billy Miller has some. He goes to see Billy. He is charged $85 for a small amount of KFC, which he does not have. To pay off the debt, Billy offers him a job as a mule, moving fried chicken from one location to another inside inside South Park. Cartman accepts. He is now a low-level operative in a fried chicken black market. This escalates rapidly in the way Cartman's plans always escalate. Within a short period of time, Cartman has maneuvered himself into position as the person running the entire illegal KFC operation in Colorado. He is sourcing directly from Colonel Sanders, who is depicted as a living man running a kind of secret farming estate in Corbin, Kentucky, the real-world hometown of the original Kentucky Fried Chicken. The estate looks like a plantation. Colonel Sanders looks like a drug kingpin. The whole thing is a direct reference to the movie Scarface, with Cartman playing Tony Montana and Fried Chicken playing the role of cocaine. He cuts pieces of fried chicken skin with a credit card and snorts them. This is not subtle. The episode is treating fried chicken and cocaine as interchangeable objects within the same basic story structure, which makes the point explicitly. Banned substances create criminal supply chains. It does not matter what the substance is. When something people want is made legally unavailable, the demand does not disappear. It funds a black market. The black market funds people like Billy Miller, and eventually people like Cartman, who runs the operation with complete seriousness and a Tony Montana accent. The two plots sit next to each other for the entire episode. Randy getting cancer to access marijuana legally, while Cartman builds a fried chicken cartel to access it outside the law. Both of them are responding to the same thing, which is a regulatory system that decided to control access to something people want. The paths they take are different. The destination is the same. They both get the thing. The regulation did not stop either of them. It made the routes to the thing more dangerous, more expensive, and in Randy's case, more physically damaging than simply having access to the thing in the first place would have been. Randy eventually has his cancerous testicles removed. The doctor who helped him get his medical card throughout this process is shown at some point becoming aware that the cancer outbreak in South Park, multiple men developing the same condition at the same time, might have something to do with recent changes in the neighborhood. He does not pursue this thought very far. The episode does not need him to. The point has already been made. The episode aired in March 2010 during an active debate in Colorado about the state's medicinal marijuana laws. Colorado had allowed medicinal marijuana since 2000, but by early 2010, the system had produced exactly the kind of chaos the episode is depicting. An average of 1,000 people per day were applying for medical marijuana cards in the state, and state officials were openly discussing whether most of those applications were genuine medical needs or exactly what Randy represents: people using a medical gateway to access something they wanted for personal reasons. The show aired into an ongoing real conversation about this exact tension and chose to make the most extreme version of that behavior its central joke. The episode received a response from KFC's corporate communications that was described as lukewarm. Officials from Corbin, Kentucky, where the original KFC was founded and which is depicted in the episode as Colonel Sanders' compound, were reported to be pleased that their city got mentioned at all. What medicinal fried chicken captures, in a way that no amount of policy discussion manages, is what it actually feels like to be on the receiving end of a system that has decided to manage your access to something through medical certification. It feels like being told that the thing you want is available, right there, legally sold, just on the other side of a door you cannot open unless you are sick enough. For Randy, the response to that feeling is to make himself sick. For Cartman, the response is to go around the door entirely. Neither response is one the regulation intended to produce. Both of them are the natural result of building the regulation the way it was built. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. By the time this episode aired, South Park had spent a decade building a picture of how the medical system interacts with human behavior. Children getting diagnosed for convenience. A parent using a label to cover up what he is doing to his son. A man talked into believing he is powerless by a program that profits from powerlessness. And now a man who burns himself with a microwave to satisfy a regulatory requirement. The escalation across these episodes is real. Each one is more extreme than the last, and the next step would be the most extreme of all, because Parker and Stone were about to turn their attention away from individuals gaming the system and toward the industry sitting at the top of it. The people who do not game the system. The people who built it. Section 6. Hummels and Heroin. The pharmaceutical industry as the final boss. Season 21, Episode 5, aired October 18th, 2017. A man in a Chuck E. Cheese costume walks into a child's birthday party and dies. He stumbles onto the stage where Marcus Preston is having his party, makes it a few feet into his performance, and collapses. He is overdosed on painkillers. The police arrive. The children at the party are confused and upset. Marcus is devastated. Chuck E. Cheese was important to him. The loss is real in the way that children experience loss, which is completely and without the protective distance that adults develop over time. The police officer standing at the scene says something that the show drops in quickly and does not repeat. He says that whenever there is a drug problem in a community, you can usually trace it back to people who have been thrown away by society and forgotten about. He says this with the flat certainty of someone who has seen the pattern enough times to recognize it without thinking. The camera cuts immediately after he says it, not to a prison, to a retirement home. This is the episode's central joke and its central argument delivered in the same move. The assumption is that forgotten people means prisoners. The show redirects that assumption toward the elderly, toward the people sitting in nursing homes across America who are also forgotten, who are also managed by institutions that keep them contained, and who are also, as it turns out, at the center of a drug supply chain that is killing people outside the walls. The retirement home in this episode is called Shady Acres. The show depicts it as a prison, not metaphorically, not loosely, directly. The elderly residents lift rubber weights the way prisoners lift weights. The hallways are filmed the way prison hallways are filmed. The power structure inside Shady Acres is identical to the power structure inside a cell block. There is a top person, someone who has accumulated enough of what passes for currency inside the institution to run everything around them, and everyone else exists in relation to that person. The top person at Shady Acres is a woman named Mrs. McGillicuddy. What she has accumulated is Hummel figurines. Hummel figurines are small ceramic decorative objects. They are typically sold as gifts for elderly people. They have no obvious connection to anything dangerous or powerful. Inside Shady Acres, they are everything. Mrs. McGillicuddy has the largest collection. Her collection is what makes her the most powerful person in the building. Other residents must deliver things to her and do things for her in exchange for Hummels, because Hummels are the currency of this particular closed system. She walks the halls with two companions behind her and farts at people she wants to intimidate. The farts are described as loose and old lady in quality, and as something you do not acknowledge when they happen to you. The residents who are being threatened by her do not acknowledge them. They simply endure them. Stan Marsh visits his grandfather Marvin at Shady Acres to drop off a Hummel as a gift. Marvin is not doing well in the power structure of the home. He is not the top person. He is being managed and pressured by Mrs. McGillicuddy the same way everyone else is. He explains the situation to Stan and asks him to help. The help he needs is for Stan to deliver a crocheted pillow made by Mrs. McGillicuddy to someone outside the home. Stan does not know what is in the pillow. He delivers it. The person he delivers it to is a costumed birthday party entertainer dressed as Swiper the Fox from the children's show Dora the Explorer. The exchange happens on a street corner. Swiper gives Stan some Hummels in return. Stan brings the Hummels back to Marvin. This is what Stan has been used for. He is a drug mule. He has been moving drugs hidden inside decorative pillows from a retirement home to costumed entertainers who are then dying at children's birthday parties. Marcus, meanwhile, has become obsessed with finding out who is responsible for Chuck E. Cheese's death. He is presented as a small, driven child doing the work of a detective, moving from clue to clue with a focus that the adults around him do not share. He holds school assemblies to update his classmates on the investigation. He confronts people who might have information. He follows the trail. A coroner's examination reveals that Chuck E. Cheese and every other entertainer who has died recently had Hummel figurines stored inside their bodies. The figurines are how the drugs are moved out of the retirement home and into the hands of the people selling them at birthday parties. Stan eventually understands what he has been doing. He tries to fix things. Cartman puts together a plan involving dressing the boys as a barbershop quartet to perform at the retirement home as a distraction, while Stan steals Mrs. McGillicuddy's Hummel collection and gives it to Marvin, making Marvin the new top person in the building. The barbershop quartet performs songs including Insane in the Membrane by Cypress Hill, Rape Me by Nirvana, Two Princes by Spin Doctors, Milkshake by Khalees, and When I Come Around by Green Day. These are described as old people songs because the residents of Shady Acres are old enough to have been young when those songs came out. The residents love it. Marvin gets the Hummel collection. He uses a bag full of the figurines to beat Mrs. McGillicuddy and her companions until he is the new top person in the building. Mrs. McGillicuddy is sent to the retirement home's version of solitary confinement, which is sitting alone in a room playing solitaire. The internal problem at Shady Acres appears resolved. Marvin is in charge. The pillow deliveries will presumably stop. Then Marcus walks through a door. The door leads into a conference room full of pharmaceutical doctors. They are at a convention. There are many of them. They are professionals. They are dressed well and sitting in a clean, organized room that is the complete opposite of Shady Acres in every visual way. Marcus stands in the doorway, a child who has spent the episode chasing a trail that started with a man dying in a Chuck E. Cheese costume at his birthday party, and he says his name and announces that he has questions. The camera holds on the room. The episode ends. There are no answers. Marcus does not get to ask his questions on screen. The pharmaceutical doctors do not respond. The show cuts before any of that happens, and the credits run and the episode is over. This is the ending Parker and Stone chose. Not a resolution, not a confrontation where the guilty party is exposed and justice follows. Just a child at a door with questions that the industry inside that room has never been required to answer. The show is pointing at something real here. The episode aired on October 18th, 2017. 3 weeks before it aired, Tom Petty died of an accidental overdose involving multiple drugs, several of them prescribed painkillers. A few months before that, Chris Cornell died in May, and Chester Bennington of Linkin Park died in July, with both deaths involving substances. In 2017, the year this episode aired, 47,600 Americans died from opioid overdoses, according to official government health data. The drugs that caused most of those deaths did not come from nowhere. They came from a supply chain, and the supply chain did not start in a retirement home with Hummel figurines. A real news investigation by 60 Minutes and the Washington Post had just published around the same time as the episode, reporting on the drug industry's role in the opioid crisis. The report described how pharmaceutical companies had systematically pushed prescriptions for powerful painkillers, how doctors had been incentivized to prescribe them, and how the industry had used its money and influence to slow down regulatory efforts to address the problem. The episode aired into this specific news environment and chose its ending accordingly. The dump truck full of pills shown arriving at Shady Acres once a week is the show's image for what overprescription of painkillers to elderly patients actually looked like. Studies at the time found that more than 1 in 5 elderly patients living in care homes were being given at least one drug that was not appropriately prescribed for them. The pills exist in Shady Acres in abundance. They exist because the pharmaceutical system has supplied them in abundance. Mrs. McGillicuddy does not manufacture the drugs. She does not bring them in from outside. They are already there, delivered on a schedule, more than the residents need or can use. The power she has built is built on a surplus that was created before she ever decided to do anything with it. The episode was reviewed well. The AV Club gave it an A-. The reviewer noted that the show did not have anything highly specific to say about the opioid crisis, that the message was fairly broad, and that this was acceptable because the episode worked as a piece of escalating comedy regardless of how precisely it engaged with the policy details. A reviewer from Den of Geek said he wished the show had mentioned the pharmaceutical companies more directly. They did mention them. They mentioned them in the last 30 seconds. They put them in a conference room at the end of the trail that a child followed from a birthday party, through a retirement home, through crocheted pillows, through costumed entertainers, to the people who made all of it possible. Marcus Preston has questions. The pharmaceutical doctors sit in their conference room. The episode ends. One political writer described the episode as fingering the culprits for the opioid crisis with more clarity than most politicians in Washington had managed at the time. The argument was that the show had done in 22 minutes what congressional hearings had failed to do: put pharmaceutical companies at the end of the chain and leave them there with nowhere to hide. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a version of South Park's pharmaceutical criticism that stays in this register, specific, angry, and aimed at a real and identifiable target. But Parker and Stone never stayed in one place for long. Having gone as direct as they had ever gone with Hummels and heroin, they turned next to something bigger, messier, and stranger. A pandemic, a marijuana farm, and a man who decided that the fastest path to a cure was himself. Section 7. Tegrity Farms as the anti-pharma alternative that becomes its own problem. Seasons 22 to 27, 2018 to 2025. Randy Marsh moves his family to a farm. This is how it starts, not with a grand announcement or a carefully reasoned plan, but with frustration. By season 22, Randy has had enough of South Park. The town feels wrong to him. The values feel wrong. Something has gone bad in the place he has been living his whole life, and he cannot name exactly what it is, but he knows the fix is to leave it and start something real, something with integrity. He sells the family home, moves Sharon and Stan and Shelley out of town to a piece of land about an hour away, and starts growing marijuana. He calls the farm Tegrity Farms. The name is Randy's pronunciation of the word integrity, delivered in the voice of someone who has decided he is a farmer now and has always been a farmer and has never been anything but a farmer. The name is important because the whole thing runs on the idea of tegrity, which Randy defines constantly and loudly as doing things the right way, the honest way, the way that real people with real values do things. Tegrity weed, as he calls it, is not corporate marijuana. It is not the product of a company with shareholders and marketing departments and profit targets. It is marijuana grown by a man on his land with his hands and his commitment to doing things properly. The episode that introduces Tegrity Farms, which is also called Tegrity Farms and aired October 17th, 2018, runs two stories alongside each other. The children's story is about vaping. Kids at South Park Elementary are using vape pens. Butters and Cartman have been selling vape juice to kindergartners. Kyle discovers this and is upset. The vaping epidemic at the school is being driven by a company called Big Vape, a large corporation that has been aggressively pushing its products toward younger and younger consumers, exactly the way tobacco companies were accused of doing for decades. Big Vape has a representative who shows up in South Park and attempts to partner with Randy, offering him a business arrangement that would fold Tegrity Farms into the larger corporate structure. Randy's response to the Big Vape representative is physical. He punches him. He then goes to the Big Vape Colorado location, a large facility full of tanks of vape juice, and with Towley's help, he dispatches the representative who has followed him there. He releases all the pressure from the vape tanks and lights a marijuana cigarette and drops it inside, blowing up the building. He walks away from the explosion with Towley, and they film a commercial for Tegrity Farms that looks like the kind of advertisement a small family farm would run. Warm lighting, simple language, a sunrise, the suggestion of honest work and honest product. This is Randy at his best in the Tegrity Farms era. He is opposing something real. Big Vape is selling an addictive product to children through aggressive marketing and corporate distribution. Randy is offering an alternative that is at least honest about what it is. The show is not saying marijuana is good. It is saying that the thing Randy is fighting, the corporate chemical industry that targets children and calls it a lifestyle product, is bad, and that fighting it by blowing up its warehouse and making your own thing in your own field is at least more straightforward. Towley, who was previously best known as a talking towel with a marijuana addiction and the catchphrase, "Do not forget to bring a towel," becomes Randy's business partner. He arrives as a state testing representative whose job is to measure the THC content of marijuana products for regulatory compliance. He tries some of Randy's product, decides it is the best marijuana he has ever had, and stays. This is Towley's redemption arc, such as it is. He is a functioning member of a small business. He has a role. He is useful. Season 23 doubles down on the Tegrity Farms storyline to a degree that the show had not done with any single ongoing plot before. The first 6 episodes of Season 23 replaced the normal South Park opening credits with a Tegrity Farms introduction sequence, sung by Randy, showing footage of the farm and its operations. The regular South Park theme was replaced. Randy makes a comment within one of the episodes that he does not care about South Park anymore, and that South Park is nothing without Tegrity Farms. This is Parker and Stone making a joke about their own show's drift. They are acknowledging that Randy has taken over. They are also doing it anyway. The Season 23 enemy is bigger than Big Vape. The show goes after MedMen, a real cannabis company that at the time was one of the most prominent corporate marijuana brands in the United States. MedMen is named in the episode. The show does not disguise or rename it. MedMen represents the thing Randy was originally positioning himself against, the corporate version of the product he is making, backed by investors and marketing budgets, and the same kind of aggressive expansion that any large corporation pursues. Towley calls MedMen posers. Randy accuses them of selling out. The conflict is between artisan production and corporate scale, the same conflict the show had played out between Tweak Bros Coffee and Harbucks Coffee in Season 2. Except now, Randy is on the small business side, and a real named company is on the corporate side. MedMen's real CEO at the time, Adam Bierman, responded publicly to the episode. He said that the fact South Park had decided they were the most culturally relevant cannabis brand on the planet was humbling. This is a CEO responding to being depicted as the villain in a cartoon by treating it as a compliment about brand recognition. The response is its own kind of commentary. But the Tegrity Farms arc is not a simple story about a good man fighting bad corporations. It never was. From the beginning, the show was tracking what Randy's commitment to his business was doing to the people around him. Stan hates the farm. This is stated clearly and often. He does not want to live an hour from his friends. He does not want to spend his time working the land. He is ashamed of what his father has become. Sharon becomes increasingly frustrated. Shelley goes along with things without enthusiasm. The family has been relocated against their will so that Randy can pursue something that he has decided matters more than their preferences. As the seasons progress, the integrity that Randy claims as the foundation of his entire operation becomes harder and harder to locate in his actual behavior. He makes decisions that damage people around him. He acts with violence when it serves the business. He becomes obsessed with profit in the way that he was originally positioning himself against. The man who blew up a big vape warehouse to protect children from corporate chemical products starts cutting corners and changing his product and lying to partners. The pandemic special in 2020, which will be covered in the next section, shows Randy lacing his marijuana with his own bodily fluids and secretly testing it on his brother-in-law. This is pharmaceutical trial behavior. This is what a person does when they have decided that their product development process does not need to involve anyone's consent but their own. By the time season 27 arrives with its episode Sick of Fancy, airing in August 2025, the collapse of Tegrity Farms is complete. ICE agents raid the farm and detain the Mexican workers who have been doing the actual labor of running the operation. Without them, Randy and Towelie cannot keep the business going. They consult ChatGPT for advice. ChatGPT tells them to rebrand. Randy announces that Tegrity Farms is now Tegrity Marijuana Solutions, an AI-based technology company for global cannabis solutions. He and Towelie begin taking ketamine together because they believe it will help them think more clearly about the rebrand. The ketamine gradually consumes their attention. The rebrand goes nowhere. They travel to Washington to appeal directly to the president for federal marijuana rescheduling. The effort fails. Randy stands in front of his family and admits the truth. The marijuana business has put them in significant debt. He sobers up. The farm is sold. The Marsh family packs up and leaves. Tegrity Farms closes after 7 seasons. The arc that started with Randy punching a big vape executive and blowing up a corporate warehouse ends with Randy taking ketamine and asking an AI chatbot how to save a failing business. The man who founded his operation on the idea of integrity over profit became someone who secretly tested his product on family members, who used corporate marketing language while claiming to oppose corporate marketing, who relocated his entire family against their wishes and kept them there through stubbornness and selective blindness about what his choices were doing to them. This is the argument South Park was building across 7 seasons. The alternative to the pharmaceutical industry, the natural product, the small producer, the man with tegrity, is not immune to the same corruption that makes the pharmaceutical industry worth criticizing. The same forces that turn corporations into systems that harm people, the prioritizing of profit over care, the willingness to test products on people who have not agreed to be tested, the use of language that claims integrity while behavior demonstrates the opposite, are available to anyone running a business, including Randy. Parker and Stone spent 22 years building a character who was susceptible to medical labels, who gave himself cancer to access a regulated substance, who founded an alternative to pharmaceutical corporate culture, and who ended up replicating pharmaceutical corporate behavior within that alternative. The Tegrity Farms arc is not a separate story from South Park's pharmaceutical criticism. It is the completion of it. The system does not corrupt only the people at the top. It corrupts the people who go around it too, given enough time and enough reasons. __quote_12___. What makes the next section so important is that the corruption of Tegrity Farms did not happen cleanly or slowly. There was a specific moment during a specific crisis where Randy crossed a line that connected his behavior directly to everything the show had been criticizing for 2 decades. And he crossed it while telling himself he was doing something good. He always tells himself he is doing something good. Section 8, the COVID vaccine and the access problem, quote 13, season 24, episode 2, aired March 10th, 2021. There is a long line of people standing outside a Walgreens. They have been there for a while. They are South Park adults, neighbors, people the show has followed for over 2 decades, and they want the COVID vaccine. They cannot get it. The security guard at the door is not letting them in. The rule is simple and absolute. Vaccines are currently only for people over the age of 55 and for first responders. Everyone else waits. The line does not move. The people in it are frustrated in the specific way that people get frustrated when they are waiting for something that exists, that is right there, that they can almost touch, and that the system has decided they are not allowed to have yet. The elderly people who have already been vaccinated drive past the line in a car. They hang out the windows and mock the people waiting. They are celebrating. They have their vaccines. They are free in a way the people in the line are not, and they want everyone to know it. The mockery is petty and specific, and the show plays it for comedy, but the image underneath the comedy is accurate. In the early months of real-world vaccine rollout in 2021, access was sharply divided by age and profession, and the people who had received vaccines were living differently from the people who had not, and that difference was visible and felt by everyone on the wrong side of it. This is the episode South Park made about the COVID vaccine, and the thing most analysis misses about it is that it is not an anti-vaccine episode. The show is not arguing that vaccines are bad or dangerous or unnecessary. The characters who are trying to stop the vaccinations are QAnon members, and the show depicts them as completely wrong about everything. The episode does not give the anti-vaccine position any sympathy or credibility. Mrs. Nelson, the teacher the boys are trying to vaccinate throughout the entire episode, dies of COVID at the end because she did not get vaccinated in time. The show makes the consequence of not being vaccinated as direct and final as it can. What the episode is criticizing is not the vaccine, it is the system of access built around the vaccine. Who gets it first? Who decides that? What happens to everyone else while they wait? The Walgreens at the center of the episode is not a symbol of pharmaceutical evil. It is a symbol of a distribution system that worked poorly and that the people running it were either unable or unwilling to fix quickly enough to save everyone it could have saved. The boys decide to get vaccines for their teachers. This is the central mission of the episode. Their teacher, Mrs. Nelson, has not been vaccinated because she is not over 55 and is not a first responder. She qualifies as neither category. She is a school teacher, an adult woman who goes to work in a building full of children every day, and the system has determined that this level of exposure does not put her high enough in the priority order to get a shot before a significant portion of the general population. The boys make a plan to get into Walgreens and get the vaccines themselves. They find an elderly woman who has already been vaccinated and offer to pay her to pretend to need assistance getting to her appointment. They claim to be with an organization called the Community Kids, a group that helps elderly people get to their vaccination locations. The security guard believes them and lets the group in. The plan works until it does not. Once inside, the elderly woman asks for her payment again, apparently having forgotten she was already paid. An argument breaks out. The elderly woman tells the pharmacist the boys are lying. Stan kicks the pharmacist. Kenny grabs the vaccines. The boys run. They escape with the vaccines. They call Mrs. Nelson and tell her to come to school the next day to get her shot. But now other adults know the boys have vaccines. A crowd forms. Everyone wants one. The boys are being asked by their parents, by neighbors, by people they have known their whole lives to give up the vaccines they took for their teacher. Kyle's father, Gerald, calls Kyle directly and tells him that by saving the vaccines for teachers, Kyle is saying his teachers matter more than his own parents, and that his mother could die from COVID. He says this with the full weight of parental guilt behind it, and Kyle, who is Kyle, feels it. This is the pressure the episode puts on the boys from inside. From outside, there is a group called the Lil Cuties, the children's arm of a QAnon organization, who have been recruited by a man named Bob White to believe that the vaccines are part of a conspiracy involving an elite group of Satan-worshipping cannibals who control everything. The Lil Cuties block the boys from getting into the school. The QAnon adults support them. Bob White is completely convinced that everything is being manipulated by powerful hidden forces, and that stopping the vaccinations is the most important thing he can do. Mr. Garrison, who has just finished his term as president and returned to South Park to reclaim his teaching job, is the person the QAnon members rally around. They believe he is sending them coded messages about fighting the elites. He is not. He is barely aware they exist. The show uses Garrison's return to make a specific joke about how people who have done genuinely harmful things in positions of power sometimes expect to be forgiven immediately upon leaving office. Garrison is baffled that people are angry at him. He spent 4 years as president behaving, as the show put it, like a Nazi-style dictator, and he assumed that would simply be forgiven once the term ended. It has not been. The three boys, Stan, Kyle, and Cartman, have a harder problem than the Lil Cuties. They do not trust each other. The episode uses the vaccine mission as the frame for a story about three people who have been friends their entire lives, discovering that their friendship has quietly broken down. Stan reveals at a critical moment that Kyle had been trying to take the vaccines for his own family, rather than delivering them to the teachers as planned. Kyle had been considering it, had been tempted by his father's guilt trip, had come close to making a different choice. Stan says the hard thing out loud. They do not trust each other. They do not actually like each other anymore. They have been pretending for Kenny's sake. None of them want to say this, but once Stan says it, everyone knows it is true. They separate Kenny from the conversation by having Cartman put headphones on him and play Madagascar 3 on an iPad. Then the three of them agree, without Kenny there to make them feel guilty about it, that there is no going back. The friendship is different now, and pretending otherwise is not doing any of them any good. They still have vaccines to deliver. They make a new plan. Mr. Garrison, realizing he needs to do something to earn back any goodwill at all in South Park, contacts the Hollywood elites directly. The show treats the Hollywood elites as a real group within the South Park world, not because Parker and Stone believe in the actual QAnon conspiracy theory, but because the episode uses them as a satirical shorthand for the idea that powerful people do control a great deal of what happens in the world, just not in the supernatural way conspiracy theories describe. Garrison makes a deal with the elites. A plane arrives. The plane is from Israel, and it is an Air Israel flight, and it brings enough vaccines for the entire town. The crowd outside Walgreens rushes to the plane. People start vaccinating themselves on the spot. The episode treats this as a victory. The boys get inside the school with the vaccines for the teachers. The teachers come out to meet them. Mrs. Nelson is the last one to come out. She is moved that the boys went to all this trouble for her, and then she starts coughing. She is infected. By the time the vaccines reach her, the virus has already taken hold. She dies. Her funeral is held shortly after. Father Maxey delivers her eulogy. Then he tells everyone to take their masks off and celebrate because they have made it through the pandemic and it is time to act like it is 2021. The episode aired March 10th, 2021 to 1.74 million viewers on its first night. By the end of the night, including all the channels it aired on simultaneously, the total reached 3.47 million viewers. It was the most watched cable program among young adult viewers that entire year up to that point. It was, according to IGN's reviewer, the episode that best balanced what the show used to do with what it had become, giving longtime viewers something that felt like the classic seasons, while acknowledging that things had genuinely changed. What makes this episode important in the context of South Park's pharmaceutical argument is that it completes a specific piece of the picture. Timmy 2000 showed what happens when medicine is handed out too freely, when the diagnostic process is so loose that everyone gets a prescription. The vaccination special shows the opposite problem. What happens when something people genuinely need is controlled so tightly by systems of access and priority and eligibility that people die in the time it takes to navigate those systems. Mrs. Nelson dies not because the vaccine did not exist, she dies because the process of getting it to her took too long. Both failures belong to the same system. The over-oath prescription and the under-distribution are two expressions of the same basic problem, which is that pharmaceutical products in America are not distributed according to who needs them. They are distributed according to rules that serve other purposes. Sometimes those rules serve profit. Sometimes they serve institutional habit. Sometimes they serve political calculation. They rarely serve the person standing outside the building in the cold waiting for something that is right there on the other side of the door. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show had spent over 20 years making this argument in different registers. The next section would bring all of it together through the single most absurd version of pharmaceutical behavior Parker and Stone ever put on screen. Because while South Park was making an episode about vaccine access and bureaucratic failure, Randy Marsh was in a separate room doing something with his marijuana and a sample of himself that would have gotten a pharmaceutical company shut down and its executives arrested. Section 9, The Pandemic Special, Randy as a one-man pharmaceutical company, Season 24 special, aired September 30th, 2020. Randy Marsh caused COVID-19. This is what the show tells you, and it is told in the specific South Park way, where the most ridiculous possible explanation for a real event is presented with complete seriousness and followed through to its logical conclusions without flinching. Randy was in China. He was there with Mickey Mouse, who in the South Park universe is a powerful and dangerous corporate figure who controls a media empire and makes decisions that affect millions of people while acting with complete disregard for anyone's safety or well-being. Mickey Mouse encouraged Randy to have sexual contact with a pangolin, which is the type of animal that scientists in the real world identified early in the pandemic as a possible link in how the virus moved from animals to humans. Randy did it. Randy came home. Randy brought COVID-19 to South Park. He knows this. By the time the pandemic special begins, he has figured out what happened, and he understands that he is responsible. South Park is under lockdown. People are sick. His brother-in-law Jimbo is in the hospital with COVID. The world has changed in every direction, and Randy is the reason. And his response to this knowledge is not to confess. His response is to figure out how to fix it without anyone finding out what he did. This is the episode's first and most important piece of pharmaceutical behavior. Randy cannot go to the government. He cannot go to scientists. He cannot submit himself to any official process for developing a cure, because the moment he does, it will come out that he is patient zero. And the moment that comes out, Sharon will know what he was doing in China, and the marriage will be over. His self-interest is the reason he must operate outside every legitimate channel that exists for exactly the situation he is in. He has to become his own research and development department. He has to test his own product on people without their knowledge or consent. He has to bring a cure to market through routes that no regulatory body would ever approve. He has a theory. He contracted COVID-19 through physical contact with a pangolin. He recovered from it. His body, therefore, has something in it that fought the virus off. He reasons that this something is in his blood. He is not entirely wrong about the basic concept of how the body produces resistance to a virus it has survived. But his understanding of biology stops there, and what he does with that partial understanding is where the episode becomes its darkest and most specific piece of pharmaceutical satire. Randy decides that the cure is in his semen, not his blood, where the actual resistance would be, his semen. The logic he uses to get there is not shown to the audience in detail because the show does not need to show it. What matters is that he has arrived at a conclusion. The conclusion feels scientific enough to him to act on, and he is going to act on it immediately without checking it against anyone who actually knows anything about medicine. He obtains some of his marijuana, the pandemic special strain that Tegrity Farms has been marketing as a product for people dealing with the stress and difficulty of living through a pandemic. He mixes his semen into it. He goes to the hospital where Jimbo is being treated. Jimbo has COVID and is in a bad way. Randy goes into Jimbo's room at night without telling Jimbo what is in what he is about to give him and gives him a marijuana joint that contains Randy's semen. Jimbo smokes it. This is the first human trial of Randy's cure. The subject has not agreed to be a test subject. The subject does not know he is a test subject. The subject does not know what he is being given. The next day, Jimbo shows signs of improvement. Randy takes this as confirmation that his theory is correct and his product works. He does not consider other explanations. He does not run more tests on a larger group with proper controls. He does not wait to see if the improvement holds before scaling up production. He has one data point from one person who did not know they were being tested, and he decides this is enough to begin selling the product to the general public. He goes back to Tegrity Farms and begins producing the semen-laced version of the pandemic special at scale. He sells it. People across South Park buy it because they are stressed and scared, and a familiar product with a new name is available, and they trust it because they have bought from Tegrity Farms before. They do not know what is in it. The label does not tell them. Randy does not tell them. He sells it to them the way any company sells a product, with marketing language and a friendly face, and the implication that this thing will make them feel better. The side effect appears quickly. Everyone who smokes the pandemic special grows a mustache. The mustache is identical to Randy's. Men, women, everyone develops the same thick facial hair. Jimbo had already grown one, which Sharon noticed and Randy had scrambled to explain away. Now it is happening across the whole customer base. The hospital fills up with people who have Randy's mustache growing on their faces. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the real-world public health official who became the face of America's pandemic response, appears on television in the episode to address the mustache situation. He tells people to wear their masks over the area where their mustaches are growing. He does not know why the mustaches are happening. Nobody in the official medical system knows where this side effect is coming from because the person responsible for it is not telling anyone. Sharon grows a mustache. This is the detail that matters most to Randy, and the reason it matters most reveals everything about where his priorities sit. Sharon has been criticizing Randy throughout the episode for trying to profit from a pandemic. She has been the moral voice in their house, telling him that what he is doing is wrong, that people are suffering, and he is treating it as a business opportunity. She has been right about this. And then Randy notices her mustache, which means she has been smoking his product, which means she has been using the thing she criticized him for making. She is a hypocrite. Randy finds this deeply satisfying. He decides in that moment not to confess after all. He is going to run a few more specials. This is the ending of the episode. Randy almost tells the truth. He stands in front of Sharon, close to the confession that would stop everything, and then he sees the mustache on her face and he turns around and walks away to make more product. The pandemic continues. The semen is still in the weed. The people buying it still do not know. Randy's self-interest has survived contact with his conscience and won cleanly. The episode is doing something very specific with the Randy is pharmaceutical company joke. Every step of what Randy does in this episode maps directly onto behaviors that real pharmaceutical companies have engaged in during real drug development scandals throughout history. Testing products on people without their knowledge, scaling up production before testing is complete, using one successful case to claim proof of effectiveness, hiding the origin of a side effect from the people experiencing it, continuing to sell a product while knowing things about it that the buyers do not know, prioritizing the continuation of the business over the transparency that would let people make informed choices about what they are putting in their bodies. Randy does all of these things. He does them not because he is evil, which is the important distinction. He is not depicted as a villain who knowingly harms people for money. He is depicted as someone who has convinced himself that what he is doing is actually helpful, that his reasoning is sound, that the end justifies the methods, that the one piece of evidence he has is enough to justify everything that follows. This is also how pharmaceutical misconduct tends to work in the real world. The people doing it rarely believe they are doing something wrong. They believe they have a product that works and that the rules slowing them down are obstacles to getting that product to people who need it. Mickey Mouse, who pressured Randy into the situation that caused the pandemic in the first place, tries to manage the fallout once he realizes Randy might expose what happened. He sends Randy a heart with the words, "You are dead," written on it in blood. He threatens to kill Randy and send Randy's DNA to scientists so the truth can be figured out through research. Randy negotiates. He promises Mickey he can fix it without the truth coming out. This is how he ends up in the pharmaceutical development business. Not through ambition or greed in the traditional sense, but through a deal made to protect himself from someone more powerful than him who has his own reasons for keeping the truth buried. The episode was watched by 2.3 million people on Comedy Central on its premiere night. When the simultaneous broadcast on MTV and MTV2 are included, the total reaches 4.05 million viewers. That made it the highest rated South Park episode since 2014. It was the most watched cable broadcast of September 30th, 2020. IGN gave it a 5 out of 10, saying the longer format hurt it and the plot was messy. The AV Club gave it a B+, noting that the show staying true to its form during a period of complete real-world chaos was itself a form of consistency worth appreciating. Cartman's subplot in the episode involves him being thrilled about social distancing because it means he does not have to go to school. He fakes connection problems on Zoom to avoid online classes. His joy turns to fury when his mother tells him the school might reopen. Cartman's self-interest is played for pure comedy. Randy's self-interest is played for something darker because Randy is an adult with resources and a product and a customer base, and the consequences of his self-interest are real in ways that Cartman's never are. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The pandemic ended, Tegrity Farms continued, Randy continued, but something had been permanently added to the picture of who Randy Marsh is and what he is capable of doing when his back is against the wall. And that picture, assembled across 24 seasons of television, was now almost complete. The only thing left was to pull all of it together and look at what it added up to. Because South Park had not been making individual jokes about pharmaceutical companies and medical systems for over 2 decades, it had been building a single argument, piece by piece, and the final section is where that argument becomes visible as one thing. Section 10. The through line. South Park's consistent pharmaceutical worldview across 27 seasons. Pull back far enough from any single episode, and a shape becomes visible that you cannot see when you are inside any one of them. The Ritalin episode is funny on its own. The Tweak episodes are disturbing in their own quiet way. Bloody Mary makes a specific argument about alcoholism and powerlessness. Medicinal Fried Chicken is about gatekeeping and black markets. Hummels and Heroin points a finger at pharmaceutical executives in a conference room. Tegrity Farms is a 7-season story about a man who becomes what he was fighting. The Pandemic special is Randy in a hospital room at night doing something to his brother-in-law that his brother-in-law has not agreed to. The Vaccination special is a teacher dying in the gap between when a vaccine existed and when the system decided she was allowed to have it. Separate, each of these is a South Park episode. Together, they are something more than that. They are a map of the same territory drawn from different angles across 27 years. And the territory is always the same place. The space between a person who needs something and the system that controls whether they get it. Parker and Stone have never described themselves as having a unified theory of pharmaceutical companies. They have described themselves as equal opportunity critics who go after whatever seems worth going after in a given week. And they have meant it, and the show reflects it. South Park has made fun of pharmaceutical companies and of people who distrust pharmaceutical companies. It has made fun of people who refuse vaccines and of the bureaucratic systems that fail to deliver vaccines to the people who need them. It has made fun of alternative medicine and of the conventional medicine that alternative medicine positions itself against. The show does not have a clean political home on this topic. What it has is something more consistent than a political position. It has a recurring set of targets. The first target, and the one that appears earliest and most often, is the diagnosis. South Park comes back to diagnosis again and again across its run, and the thing it is always looking at is who benefits from the diagnosis being made. In Timmy 2000, the beneficiaries are the school that wants a manageable student, the pharmacist and doctor who bought pharmaceutical stock before the prescriptions started flowing, and the parents who get quieter children. Timmy himself, the person the diagnosis is supposedly for, gets nothing from it. He was already doing fine without it. He joins a band, he plays festivals, he is the lead singer of Timmy and the Lords of the Underworld, and the crowd loves him, and none of that required a label or a pill. In Gnomes and Tweak vs. Craig, the diagnosis benefits the parents. The ADD label gives the Tweaks a way to explain their son's condition that points away from the coffee and toward a medical category that nobody can see inside of. It does nothing for Tweak. He keeps shaking. He keeps being given more of the substance that makes him shake. He will be shaking for the next 25 years of the show because the people responsible for helping him have found a more comfortable explanation and stopped looking. The second target is the framework that tells people they are powerless over their own behavior. Bloody Mary is the most direct attack on this, but the thread runs through more episodes than that one. The idea that a behavioral pattern is a disease in the same way that an infection is a disease, and that the disease requires ongoing professional treatment rather than personal decision-making, is one that South Park views with consistent suspicion. The show is not saying struggling with substances is easy or that people should simply decide to be fine. What it is saying is that the disease framework, the specific language of powerlessness and higher powers and requiring institutional support, can be used to make people dependent on the institutions offering that support. Randy gets worse after being told he is powerless, not better. He only improves when someone tells him the opposite. The third target is the access system. This one shows up in Medicinal Fried Chicken and in the Vaccination special, and they approach it from opposite directions. Medicinal Fried Chicken looks at what happens when a substance is locked behind medical access in a way that forces people to harm themselves to get through the door. The Vaccination special looks at what happens when a substance that exists and works is held back from people by priority systems and eligibility rules until it is too late for some of them. Both episodes are about the same basic problem. The system of access to pharmaceutical products in America is not organized around getting those products to the people who need them. It is organized around other things, and people suffer in the gap. The fourth target is the industry itself, and this is the one South Park saves for its most pointed moments. Hummels and Heroin traces a drug supply chain from a birthday party to a retirement home to a nurse's conference room full of pharmaceutical doctors and then stops, leaving a child in the doorway with questions the industry has never been asked to answer on screen. The ending of that episode is not an accident, and it is not a cliffhanger. It is the show saying explicitly that the people most responsible for the opioid crisis have been protected from accountability by the same money and influence that made them responsible for it in the first place. The questions exist. Nobody with the power to answer them has been made to answer them. A cartoon child has to be the one to walk through the door. The fifth target, and the one that makes South Park's pharmaceutical criticism genuinely unusual compared to other shows that have gone after the same territory, is the alternative. Most stories about pharmaceutical companies implicitly or explicitly position something else as the answer. Natural remedies, alternative approaches, small producers, individual freedom from corporate systems. South Park refuses this comfort. Tegrity Farms is the sustained proof that refusing it is the right call. Randy builds his alternative with genuine conviction. He fights real corporate enemies. He blows up a big vape warehouse. He calls out MedMen by name. He talks constantly about integrity and values and the importance of doing things the right way. And then he secretly laces his product with his own bodily fluids and tests it on a sick man in a hospital room at night without telling anyone. The alternative becomes the thing it was opposing. This is not presented as a betrayal or a twist. It is presented as the natural result of what happens when any person or any company gets enough investment in a product and enough reasons to protect that investment. Forces that corrupt large pharmaceutical companies are not unique to large pharmaceutical companies. They are available to anyone. Parker and Stone spent 7 seasons demonstrating this with Randy because 7 seasons was apparently how long it took to make the point completely. What is left after all of this is a picture of how South Park actually thinks about medicine and pharmaceutical companies, assembled from 27 years of episodes and never stated directly in any single one of them. The show believes that diagnoses are often made for reasons that have nothing to do with helping the person being diagnosed. It believes that the language of disease and powerlessness applied to behavior tends to serve institutions more than individuals. It believes that controlling access to substances creates black markets and self-harm in people desperate enough to find another way in. It believes that the pharmaceutical industry has used its money and influence to avoid accountability for specific harms it has caused. And it believes that none of these problems are solved by the alternatives people reach for because the alternatives carry the same susceptibility to the same corruptions. This is a coherent worldview. It is not a libertarian one, because South Park is not arguing that everything should be available to everyone with no restrictions. It is not a socialist one, because the show is consistently suspicious of institutions regardless of who is running them. It is not a conservative one, because the show has no nostalgia for a time before pharmaceutical companies existed. It is something more specific and harder to label. A consistent suspicion of any system that positions itself between a person and what they need and then profits from managing that position. Randy Marsh is the character who carries this argument most completely. He is a hypochondriac who believes diagnoses when they are delivered with authority. He is someone who gave himself cancer to satisfy a regulatory requirement. He is someone who built an alternative to corporate pharmaceutical culture and then behaved inside that alternative exactly the way corporate pharmaceutical companies behave. He is someone who tested a product on a family member without consent, hid the side effects from his customers, and chose to continue selling rather than come clean. He is also genuinely funny, and the show clearly loves him and has given him more screen time than almost any other character across the show's history. That combination, the genuine affection for a character who is also the embodiment of everything the show criticizes, is what makes South Park's pharmaceutical argument land in a way that a straightforward critical documentary never could. You laugh at Randy, you root for Randy sometimes. You watch him blow up the big vape warehouse and think he might actually be the good guy this time. And then you watch him in the hospital room with Jimbo and you remember what the show has been telling you since the year 2000, which is that the person standing between you and what you need. The person who has decided they understand your situation well enough to manage your access to the things that might help you is always acting in their own interest as much as yours. Sometimes their interest and yours line up. Sometimes a doctor writes a prescription that genuinely helps. Sometimes a company produces a drug that saves lives. South Park has never argued otherwise. What it has argued consistently across Ritalin and Tweak and Randy and retirement homes and vaccination lines and a conference room full of pharmaceutical doctors is that the system surrounding those moments of genuine help is not designed primarily to produce them. It is designed to sustain itself. And the people running it will tell you that you have a disease, that you are powerless, that you need them, and that the thing they are selling is the answer, right up until a child walks through a door with questions they have never had to answer. South Park has been asking those questions since 1998. It has dressed them in cartoon characters and ridiculous plots and jokes that would get the show pulled off the air in a dozen countries. But underneath every Hummel figurine and every microwave and every Ritalin prescription and every semen-laced marijuana joint, the questions have been the same. Who benefits from your diagnosis? Who profits from your powerlessness? Who decides when you are sick enough to deserve the thing you need? And who is sitting in the conference room when the child finally walks through the door? If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.